All right. I think we can begin. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone joining us from across the continent. I'm Christiana and very excited to have you join us for the ALCA Learning Series, July edition. On behalf of the Association of Language Companies in Africa, I extend a very warm welcome to you. And whether you're a language professional, an industry stakeholder, or simply curious about the future of the industry, we are so grateful you're here today. And so today's session, titled AI Disruption and Localization, looking at global insights, African strategies, and also building collective resilience, promises to be a very timely one and thought-provoking conversation led by some of our industry's most insightful voices. Without saying so much, I'll dive into some housekeeping rules for us. Let's ensure that we are muted at all times unless we are allowed to speak, so we can minimize the disruptions. Kindly use the chat box if you want to ask a question before the official Q&A session at the end of the meeting. Post your comments, your suggestions, anything you want to say. Kindly use the chat box and it will be attended to. And now if you experience any connectivity issues, you could turn off your video, for a smoother audio experience. The session is being recorded, and so sit back, relax, and enjoy. So over to you, Johan.
Yes, welcome everyone. I'm very excited to have these two ladies here. I've recently joined them and in the AI Localization Think Tank, and it's been a privilege to share some of the things. Generally, when we speak, each time we speak, it seems sort of revolutionary, insightful. So I wanted to share some of these things with you. When I don't want to the traditional boring introductions. Well, I had that, and then I thought this morning, no, let me rather get something going. And what better way to get it going is to have a chat this morning in the car with my favorite lady voice from ChatGPT, and we got something going. So let's start with Marina Pantcheva. She is the Director of Linguistic Services at RWS. She is also a linguist, a polyglot. She's on language 1,500 of the 2,000 African languages. She is my partner in crime when it comes to hating it when people misspell names. She has a PhD in nanosyntax, whatever that is. She left academia to cycle straight into localization and linguistic AI because whenever I speak to her, she is on a bike somewhere. She's big on clarity, clever, tech, and in her talks, you'll often spot things like asterisks and obliques and cauldrons and things. And to get some difficult concept going, I have even seen her wear a chef's hat in one of her talks. So Belén Agulló García, I've practiced that. She's the executive consultant of innovation at Terra, but She's also a game-loving localization nerd, trainer by instinct, researcher by curiosity. She dodges job titles, outgrows roles on purpose, and lives for a challenge. When she's not working, she's saving animals, thrifting vintage clothes, or watching Gilmore Girls, which I like. Favorite movie, Lord of the Rings, which I like. So welcome. And the main thing I want to get with this session is to there are lots of hype and fear mongering and everything out there. So I thought it might be a good chance to just get back to basics and say, this is what's going on in the industry, and this is not what's going on in the industry, because we're seeing cray, and I've been there. The anxiety has been high, it is there, but seeing things like localization is dead and we're all going to be out of jobs within 1 month. I wanted to dispel some of those things and get things going, especially since us here in the African localization industry, we are starting with some of these concepts only now. So what better way to learn how to deal with it here than to see what has been happening in other parts of the world. So perhaps we can start with one of the most basic things, and something that the more that I deal with localization and AI, the more I get confronted with the concept of people not knowing what is AI. So perhaps, Marina, you can start. What is AI? And then importantly, what is it not?
Yes, let's start with what it is not. So AI is definitely not this magician that has the answer to everything, can replace any human for any task and do wonders. There's a lot of hype around AI, as I'm sure everyone from you has already noticed. AI is basically just a tool. And as any tool, there are ways to control it. And there are things for which we can use it. And there are things for which we cannot use it. Just this morning, I was biking again to work, and I was thinking about useful metaphors. I like doing that. That would help me explain to people in a more accessible way what AI is, what an LLM is, and so on. So the way I thought that I will be, talking about AI to my now 8-year-old actually already, is to explain that a large language model, because that's a problem we're currently solving, like using large language model for everything. A large language model is like a Swiss knife. It's a tool that can do many things, but it's not really designed to do any particular thing. So as in a Swiss knife, you have a screwdriver, a plus screwdriver, a minus screwdriver, you have a bottle opener, but none of them are really good, right? They're too small. They're not very comfortable to work with. If you really need to unscrew like 50 screws, you better take a proper screwdriver that has been designed specifically for that and has exactly the right shape of the head. And an LLM is just like that. It can do a lot of things, but it's not an expert in anything. It's a generic tool. And then if you want to do something very specific, we may get surprised that an LLM cannot handle it at the level of an expert. Well, this is simply because we are using a generic tool. Once we understand that, I think it is easier to approach AI with the mindset that these are tools. Many of those large language models are too generic. They're state of the art, yes, but they can do many things, but none of them really at the level of expertise that a linguist, for example, an expert linguist in a particular language has. So the key here is to find the use cases which these new tools can handle well and help them handle them well, either by fine-tuning or by having very sophisticated prompts or by building agentic workflows. There are many ways, but I won't go into details right now so that Belén can also chip in and share her view.
Yeah, thank you, Marina. I love your metaphors and analogies. They're my favorite thing. Yes, I mean, from what you said, I think what we can conclude is that when we talk about AI, we mean LLMs these days, right? At least in our industry, because AI, artificial intelligence, is such a vast field that comprises many, many different things. But the thing that has changed recently and where all this hype is being fed is because ChatGPT, which is a large language model, what Marina just described, was released already almost 3 years ago. It's been like it feels like, it was not so long ago, but it's been at least 3 years ago that we have this new emerging tool called generative artificial intelligence. Why it's generative? Because it generates things, right? So when we talk about AI in our field these days, most of the times we refer to LLMs like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and all these different companies that are developing this technology. But sometimes also now, because in our industry, everything seems to be AI driven or AI something these days, some people are also referring to AI when they talk about neural machine translation, which is the most advanced type of machine translation that has been developed since the 2017 was developed by Google, and it's been improved over time. So when we talk about AI in our field, we mainly think either about neural machine translation, which might not be perceived as AI, as this cool new thing, generative AI, but we talk about AI and now we refer to neural machine translation as well. And we mainly talk about LLMs. And what LLMs can do is what Marina said. They can do many things. They can translate, they can post-edit, they can check the quality of a file, they can extract terminology and so on and so forth. But for me, I totally agree with Marina when she said that the trickiest part is to find the use cases. Because now everyone is like, yes, let's use AI, but then but what for? And do we really need to use AI for these particular things, or are there better solutions that already exist?
And I like that in the sense of something that is also interesting for me in the AI hype is that often when people say AI and they say I'm doing my business in AI and so on, it is just old-fashioned automation, and so it's been there. It's much of it is just running a script. But for example, one of the things that AI is good at is helping you do automation, create automation. But I want to get both of you with a few others, and I've recently joined it, is the AI Localization Think Tank, which I think has sprouted from that anxiety that we have been an overwhelming anxiety that all of us are experiencing or have experienced or is dealing with. So perhaps, Belén, what is the AI Localization Think Tank, and just sort of shortly some of the history, why it was created?
Yes, of course, I'm happy to share, Johan. So yeah, the AI Localization Think Tank is a joint initiative between several people from the industry that come from different backgrounds, LSPs, localization buyers, technology providers, translators, and all the stakeholders basically in our industry. We have conformed this think tank with the aim of altruistically share knowledge about AI. We perceived, and it was me and Marina last year, we connected. I had this idea of creating some sort of community around AI in localization, but I wasn't sure how to go about it. Specifically, I didn't have the energy of the bandwidth to do it alone. But then I met Marina, which is one of the most amazing human beings in the planet and with a lot of energy. And together we said, okay, we at least need some sort of like shared space where we can share resources, ask questions to each other, and see how we can support each other. Because for me, something that is very important about the think tank, but also in general, how I was perceiving this AI movement last year and also this year, is that it seems to be like a race towards something that no one really knows what it is. And it's very competitive. It's not collaborative. It's not community driven. Companies are like competing, like we want to release the new AI thing and we want to be the first one and we want to know all these secrets and no one else should know. But for me, AI, as this new wave of AI with generative AI and so on and so forth, it can only progress in community. So one company alone, one person alone won't be able to really build something meaningful and make our industry advance in the right direction if we don't collaborate. First of all, because there's so much knowledge out there and it's impossible for one person to absorb everything. And also because there are different perspectives on how AI is impacting us, and one person cannot have all this perspective. So for me, that's why it was important to also take a moment to rest, to breathe, and say, okay, that doesn't need to be a competition. It can be a collaborative effort, and we together share this knowledge with the community. And Marina, you are one of the most generous people I know in this field, because you study a lot. You spent, you read that 900 pages book that no one else probably have read. And then you are disseminating that knowledge through the think tank, but also through other channels that you're participating in, like associations and so on and so forth. So I think we kind of share that vision of altruistic knowledge sharing, collaboration, and advancing together. Marina, what do you think about it?
I fully agree. But there is one more very important aspect of the think tank, at least for me, and that is the access to different opinions. So I read a lot, yes, I think a lot, but I always look at things from my perspective, and I don't have all that knowledge and access to use cases, information, and experiences that will allow me to look at the same issues through the eyes of a freelance translator, for example, or somebody in academia. And to me, the big value of the think tank is that being a very diverse group of experts and professionals, we can actually enrich each other's worldview by discussing the same problems from different angles. And what I like is that we often disagree. So I often get very surprised when I write an article, then I get comments from members of the think tank who basically disagree. And it's a delightful experience to discuss with them, because it's a very safe space. So we can say anything, we can be controversial, we can share our opinion and just get richer from that. That is, to me, the value of the think tank. And I would like this value to basically get propagated to the entire community. And we have this Ask the Think Tank feature on our webpage, where you can just click a button and ask anything, whatever's on your mind. And then we discuss the question, and we will either get back to you through an email if it is a very personal question, if you wouldn't like the question to be public, with a public response, or we can write an article by one expert, by many experts chipping in, so that we answer all the questions that are out there.
And I think, I mentioned it to Christiana as well. We can afterwards, the think tank has a website with a resources page that we can share to all of the attendees and so on afterwards. But I think one of the things that we can also do here is share a few things, because as Belén mentioned, there's so much information that any one person can't handle it. So perhaps share some specific things that we can start with. So I think this because I've also received, even in my company as well, when I got super flustered and all over the place, I had a chat with my boss, and he was sort of very sober and said, listen, let's start from a place. Let's get one thing going, move on to the next. So I want to perhaps start with Marina, where, just moving a little bit back, you mentioned NMT, neural machine translation. So in the African localization space, that might be, let's say, older news for you guys, but even that isn't working. It's not ubiquitous on the continent. So if it's designed for machine translation, it still needs a lot of work for African languages. So one of the things that I want to just ask is that incremental, small little steps. Marina, where do you start? If you know absolutely nothing, but you are keen to learn, even if you aren't keen to learn, where do you start?
Okay, so first of all, let me clarify that LLMs are not a continuation of neural machine translation. So in Africa, you don't need to go the way, first we make neural machine translation work for African languages, and only when we are there, just like French was there 5 years ago, we go and we make large language models work for African languages. These are two really quite independent technologies. They work with neural networks, yes, but one is encoder-decoder, which gets trained on bilingual data. This is neural machine translation. Large language models are decoder only, so they're basically half of what a neural machine translation engine is as an architecture, and they work with unstructured data. You just need to put text in them. So completely different technology, independent from each other. The only thing that unifies them is that you need compute power. Right, you would need GPUs. You need to run those engines, the computations that they're doing.
And sometimes huge ones.
Yes. But if you, so dissociating the two, now let's talk about large language models. Okay, the new thing, the hype thing. To start with large language models, to me, the first steps are understand them, educate yourself. And as Johan said, there's a lot of information out there. Not all of it is high quality. A lot of it is AI generated, and it's basically not very useful. So finding the right resources to gain understanding of how AI works. Once we understand that, and one doesn't need to invest more than, I would say, I don't know, read more than 100 pages, right? Invest more than a week of reading into that. But it's vital to understand how a large language model works, because only then can we use them in the right way for the right things, for the right use cases, and know how to use them, that is, prompt them correctly. Let me give an example. I love metaphors and I love examples. The other day, we were working with a large language model. It had to perform a particular task, which was basically language identification. And the large language model had to identify segments that were coming in all sorts of languages, and it has to find which are not in English. So there are two ways to ask the large language model to do the task. Number one is to ask the LLM, tell me the language of that segment. Identify the language. Is it French or German or Chinese or Hindi, whatever. The other way is tell me whether it's English or not. Now, for a human, what is easier? To detect the exact language, whether it's Telugu or it's Shona or it's Luganda, or just distinguish English from non-English if you speak English. What is easier? It's easier to say it's English or not, because you know what English looks like. So anything that doesn't look like English is non-English, easy. For an LLM, it's exactly the opposite. It's much easier to identify the language than identify whether it's English or non-English. And when you know how an LLM has been trained, how exactly it works, you know this is the more natural task for an LLM. It's the easier task. And this is where your prompt asking to identify a particular language will have higher accuracy than a prompt that asks an LLM to tell you whether that's English or non-English. And the reason for that is because in the training data of an LLM, you don't have segments that are labeled as non-English. Every segment has a language to it. So LLMs learn what the languages are. They don't learn what non-English is, because there is no such thing as non-English on the internet, right? So that's a concrete example showing that the very first step is understand how an LLM has been trained, how it reacts to prompts, what happens inside to some extent, so that then you know what an LLM would be good for and how to extract what you need from an LLM. Next step would be get access to tools, get funding for that, get API connectors, get the servers, that's already get investment. But start with getting knowledge and identifying the use cases for which you want to use an LLM.
And on that note, what I've found works, and I've spoken to a few people during the past week, interesting enough, that asked me, where do I start? And what worked with me is just even if you don't have time, reading what it is and how it is created and what it is done is a great first step. But for me, also another step is to just go on to, obviously, Belén mentioned there some of the examples of a large language model. There are many, some of them that's not so good, some of them that are very good. But for me, to have an analogy that Marina loves is, for me, it is, that you in university or class or school or so on, and there's something, the concept that you don't understand, you're afraid to put up your hand, and you still don't understand it. So learning about, for me, a large language model is interacting with a generative AI. So generative AI, there are many of them out there. ChatGPT is probably the one that most people know. It's free. There are free versions. Just register and start speaking. Say, I don't know what is AI. Please give me an example. And the nice thing that I've found, and that other people have also commented on, is you can say whatever you want, and say, I don't understand what you just said there. Please explain it to me in a better way. The one thing that I just want to say that people might not know is generative AI or large language models, they are people pleasers. So they love to give you something that you might like. So just always be wary of that what the thing tells you might not be correct. And that's why I think the resources on the think tank, those resources have been curated to be true and correct. But just start creating a free account and start interacting with something. Say, what is a large language model? What is an API? What is that XYZ? And soon each increment starts with that. Just start anyway. So I think perhaps, Belén, what is AI in our industry? What is it good for?
Yes, so I think that's still an unanswered question by the industry. Honestly, I think we are learning step by step how to leverage this technology and how to actually use it to our benefits. Of course, in certain use cases, both machine translation, neural machine translation, and LLM-based translation can be good. In our experience, for example, at my company, we are seeing that at least for high resource languages or languages where there is a lot of data available on the internet, and therefore this data has been used to train these large language models, such as Spanish, for example, or French, and these like languages that have more data basically on the internet. Usually the LLMs are performing quite well for translation. Of course, it still needs to be post-edited, it still needs to be checked by a human, but we are seeing a leap in quality between neural machine translation and LLMs for certain content types, for certain languages. So I'm saying it's with a pinch of salt. I also come from the multimedia, with a multimedia background. So beyond LLMs, there are other generative tools for multimedia, or not generative, but just plain old models, neural models, such as automatic speech recognition, for example, for transcription or for creation of subtitles. Of course, and Johan, we were discussing the other day, there will be use cases for which this will be useless. For example, where there are many speakers talking over each other, the machine, even if there is a speaker diarization, which is that the machine will try to understand whose voice is from whom a speaker and try to put that together, it's going to be challenging. But for example, for a tutorial, for a video, or for example, myself right now, if the machine had to be transcribing me, it would be more or less decent, even if I don't have a perfect English accent far beyond from that, but it would be more or less useful. I'm seeing that these technologies are being used more and more for live events, specifically to create live captions so that the events are more accessible. So that's something. And we're also seeing how AI dubbing or neural synthetic speech, which is basically robotic voices, synthetic voices, are also being used more and more, even if the technology is far from being perfect. But for certain easy use cases, such as, for example, audio description, where the tone of the speaker should be flat and like more neutral, or again, things that have to do with accessibility, this technology is being implemented and leveraged more. So those are some of the examples that I can share.
Marina, do you have in your experience, what are some of the things for me? Summarization of things, it's generally helpful, but when you say that, can you speak just a little bit about, in those summarizations, what is or what are hallucinations? Why is that sometimes a problem?
It's a problem because it's simply not true. Okay. The question is, why do they happen? So I fully agree with you. And that was actually the first use case that came to my mind for LLMs. They are good at summarization. This again follows from the way they are trained and built and so on. So they have a so-called attention mechanism that can correlate basically every word in a text to every other word and understand how important these words are to each other. Okay, so that's the attention mechanism. And using this attention mechanism, it can extract like the most important thing out of a text in a flat way. You know, I always have the feeling these summarizations are flat, meaning that, you know, you get this kind of a level of importance that is, you know, basically the key points from a meeting or from a text. But it's not always what is really important for the person. Right? Sometimes I read meeting notes and there are all the key points, but I'm like, actually, the most important thing for me in this meeting was this little side note that my colleague made, which means that we are getting green light, perhaps, right? That is already part of the context and the interpersonal relationships and everything, you know, and so on. So it will just mechanically extract the most important things. But now the thing comes that LLMs are basically just predicting machines. What they do is they string one after another, word by word, or more specifically, precisely, token by token, the next most probable word that they know based on statistical probabilities derived from analyzing all the training data that they ever got, and that is 13 billion tokens, right? So a lot of training data. So sometimes, a word will come in a context of other words that will basically trigger the LLM to give you not the right word that was used in that meeting, but something similar, something with a similar meaning. And then the next word will be a little bit more off, and then a little bit more off. So basically the whole path that the LLM takes starts deviating from the truth, from the ground truths, from what was in that text, and ends up completely different place with a completely different meaning. That is hallucination. You can test it. There's a very easy way to test it. At least a year ago, that always worked. Put your name in ChatGPT and the company you work for, and ask, who am I? Or who is that person? Like, who is Johan Botha in Folio? Very often, at least before, I haven't tested it soon, it will start with Johan Botha is a linguist, blah, 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 and then it will continue with the CEO or the president of the South African Republic, and so on. It will assign to you a very prominent role of a very prominent person, because this is the text that the LLM has seen on the internet, right? On the internet, you have text about the CEOs, the presidents, the famous politicians, the famous authors. That's why your name in a particular context will then get associated with the most likely role for you, and that's going to be a CEO, because that's the kind of people who are all over the internet, right? Try it. This is the reason. It's simply because of probabilities. And this is something to be aware of. As Johan said, LLMs can hallucinate. This is simply because they are stochastic, random, probabilistic machines. Okay, they don't really know in the sense that we humans know what is really true. And people tend to believe them because what an LLM responds, as Johan said, is more likely to be pleasing for you. LLMs are actually really trained as part of their instruction fine-tuning to provide answers that users like. And users, we humans, inevitably like those answers that confirm our beliefs, that are pleasant to us. Those are the ones we're going to give thumbs up, right? We don't give thumbs up to answers which we disagree with, which are not pleasant. This is how LLMs learn to please users. This is where psychophancy comes from.
So what are some of the measures that still on Marina, what are some of the measures, and just as a side note, Marina and I have spoken at length about mediocrity that's being created with all of these summaries of notes and long articles, where it's just sort of the basic flow of things, and you don't interact and get the nitty-gritty. But what are some of the things that you can do in let's use ChatGPT. What are some of the things that you can do to minimize hallucinations, if at all? Are there, I know I created a file that says, do this XYZ, but are there things that, besides just being aware of it, are there things that you can do to help?
Yes. ChatGPT is maybe not the best example, because ChatGPT is a kind of a user-oriented platform where you have very little control. In fact, you don't even have control over your own prompt, because whatever you type in the chat environment gets another system prompt superimposed on it. It's hidden, you don't know it, and you don't control it. So you're not sending your sentence or your request to the LLM, you're sending your request embedded in a much larger prompt, which you don't control. But here are ways to fight hallucination. First of all, be aware of it and use critical thinking. Now, this is a skill that's becoming more and more important as we tend to cognitively offload our brains to AI. Being able to think critically becomes vital. Okay, so critical thinking. But in a more technical way, we can reduce hallucinations by providing data and context to an LLM. In ChatGPT, if you ask a question, provide additional context. So say something like, tell me about, what AI is by, summarizing those and those research articles that I don't have time to read, or do a web search, or like go to this approved resource like that I trust and extract the information from there. In the context of translation, don't just tell an LLM translate this segment. You need to instruct the LLM to translate the segment, but take into consideration approved terminology, supply the approved terminology for the segment, supply the style guide rules in a condensed form, give it the context that it will allow it to anchor the response to your prompt to actual data that is relevant. In this way, we reduce hallucinations. Right, and the last thing is have checks. Right, so if you're using AI in production, not just chatting up, always have some sort of validation check. The easier one, this is like not too complicated, is run some sort of a semantic similarity, or maybe you can even run another LLM and check whether what the translation of the LLM actually semantically corresponds to the source segment, right? You can have LLM1 that translates, and then LLM2 that ensures or checks whether the meaning of the source is identical to the meaning of the target, or the LLM just went berserk and added there another 100 words that weren't present in the source, which is something that sometimes happens.
I think one of the main issues and questions that, and we spoke about that as well, that I have to deal with, or that I get asked, and perhaps Belén, you can start with that, is I am a small LSP. I don't have the manpower. I don't have the tech savvy to implement all of these major things overnight. So my business is going to fail, or so on. Is that the reality? Do you need a huge tech side of your business, or can a small LSP start and get some insights and some advancement? Because in Africa, as I said, I would probably say about 80% of the LSPs in Africa is sort of on the 5 to 2 to 10 individual mark. So what are some of the things that you can speak to regarding that? And then perhaps Marina as well.
Yes, definitely. I mean, this is one of my favorite topics, because beyond AI, I think it is about understanding your unique value proposition as an LSP. Right now, I work in a mid-size LSP, so we definitely don't have budget for technology and anything like that. But I think, first of all, there are two exercises before jumping into AI or what you want to do with your lives. First of all is understanding what your current customers want, what their evolving needs are, because maybe today they are doing this, but they are already thinking about the next thing that they want to do. So it is very important to talk to your customers, interview them, get insights also from the industry in general, and what the industry is demanding from us language service providers. That's the first thing. Once you have that understanding, you should reevaluate your unique value proposition. What it is that you offer that it's special, and are your services or products still something that people want to pay for? And also think about how your business will evolve over time. Maybe in the future there will be more post-editing and less translation from scratch. And how are you planning to adjust your business for that? And also, how are you creating new value for the industry that is not going to be quickly commoditized? Because one perception that is around us in the industry is that translation is commoditized, and that could have a negative impact on us as service providers, especially for small and mid-sized ones. So what it is that we can continue offering, what type of services. I mean, thinking about Africa, I can imagine how much consultancy, cultural consultancy and language consultancy is required for companies to go to market in Africa, because usually companies, especially if they are in the North Hemisphere, they might have no idea how to actually appeal to users, to customers and so on in Africa. So that type of more consultative role, I think it's something that I'm seeing in more and more small and mid-sized LSPs, and customers are looking for that. So that's one thing. And regarding to technology, of course, you cannot like do like this and say, no, technology, I don't care, it will never come to me and it will not impact me. Like it or not, also for us, technology is there. Our customers at Terra, for example, are more and more asking for, like, they want to know more about technology and so on and so forth. So you really need to study and be on top of where AI is going. Even if you don't have the bandwidth or the resources to actually developing an AI super flashy solution, that's okay. But at least you need to know, and especially you need to know how AI is impacting the type of services and things that you're doing right now. So at least you can tell your customers, because your customers might even know less than you at this point. So just knowing a little bit more will make you look very smart, very like forward thinking and so on and so forth. So that's one thing. And the other thing, when you don't have tons of resources to invest, even sometimes you cannot even afford the license for this new cool tool that is out there. It is an example from my company. There is this tool that is some sort of orchestrator where you can like create different workflows with AI and so on and so forth. And it sounded really cool, and it's cool because we don't have to develop that. But when they told us the price, it was like, we don't have that money. Like, and also like a call for all these technology companies out there, like, please have price tiering for small companies, and don't try to charge the same for an LSP and for Uber, because we don't have the same budget, guys. So we would appreciate if you have tiering when it comes to pricing. But anyways, one thing that I really appreciate, and probably some of you or most of you, if you're working in these industries, that you have a TMS or a CAT tool, like your translation tool. And sometimes those translation tools are already integrating technology in their infrastructure, AI technology. So for example, in my case, in my company, we mainly use MemoQ. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this TMS, but it's a very well-known TMS with many years in the industry, and they are little by little integrating AI and very advanced capabilities in their tool. That is very good for us, because then we have access to all this technology or cutting edge without having to invest any additional money. So I would try to rely on your CAD tool provider as well, talk to them, see where they are, or if you are in the process of deciding which tool you are going to use for your operations, try to look at the ones that have more advanced features and so on and so forth. That would be, sorry, very long answer, but this was very important topic.
One thing, sorry, Marina, before you start, one thing that I like you mentioned is the tier system, and that's even more important, I think, for us here, because even the cheapest tiers are like enterprise tiers for there. So it's important to, I think, for many of the companies that we work with, and that's why I think it's important to engage with those CAT tool providers or TMS or so on, and say to them, listen, you have a potential large market here. Let's discuss some things you don't have. We don't need all of the bells and whistles of things. So yeah, I like that. Sorry, Marina.
No, nothing to be sorry about. That's a very valid point. Initially, I thought I didn't agree with you two guys, because we've been talking about that before. I thought initially that to get started, you need very little, because I had very little when I got started. In fact, I started as a side project. It was a hobby weekend project to read and learn. And then I started gaining expertise, just by reading in the evenings an article here or there as a side activity. wasn't my job. And then passionate people started joining me. So then we were a team of 2 people, a team of 3 people. At the time, we were a team of 4 people. We already started building our own tool because one of them was developer, a second one joined. So in a way, it was like grassroots, team growing from within. It was not an investment done by a large LSP into a group of people saying, here you have the money, here you have the time, now you start doing AI. It was a spontaneous effort, a spontaneous interest, which can happen in a small LSP as well. You don't need more than 4 people. But now I agree with you, because this is the first step, right? At some point, you've gained the knowledge, you already have some expertise, you've played, you have a couple of very passionate and intelligent developers who can do miracles. All the information is out on the internet. It's not like a closed club. Everybody can learn. But at some point, you will need the investment in the tools, in the licenses, in the infrastructure. And that is where I agree with you now, guys. And that's why I love the AI Localization Think Tank, because I can change and adjust my opinions. I agree with you that size then really matters. So here is my take for the African reality. Trying to be very kind of scientific and objective about it. Well, Africa has small languages when it comes to digitalization. Okay, I was just looking at a small LLM developed for African languages. Swahili was there, the biggest language, which was used in the training data, and it had 1 billion tokens. Okay, that's the most you get out of an African language, 1 billion tokens. Now, ChatGPT 3.5 was trained on 13 trillion tokens, right? African languages will never get to that level of digitalization to be able to really be used to train a large language model. It's accepted. So we're working with beautiful but small languages, right? And this is, in a way, this has to be borne in mind when thinking about what we can do with this technology. Are we just gonna wait, or like you wait for larger players on the market trying to develop AI solutions and then commoditizing translation and then using the African language specialists as the proverbial human in the loop, coming at the end of the loop and checking for machine errors, which I think is not the right way to use the creativity, the richness of knowledge and the skills of African linguists? Or will African linguists and LSPs try to move themselves more to the beginning of that loop, where the work done has a higher value, and start working together with bigger providers to provide consultation, as Belén mentioned, not only consultation when it comes to cultural awareness and, market access and understanding the market, but purely linguistic consultation. Because when you want to train an LLM, you actually need linguists to pick your data, to analyze the data, to curate it, to prepare it. When you want to use an LLM, you actually need native linguists to design the prompts, fine-tune the prompts, evaluate the output, not just, evaluate the output of AI translations. No, evaluate the output of engines that are being used for that. So my dream, really, and I don't know how realistic it is, but my dream is for African LSPs to move also in the direction of providing the higher value work of being AI specialists, because knowledge is accessible to everybody. Large orchestration tools are not affordable by everybody, but knowledge is out there for free and anyone can acquire it without having to pay for that, except for paying with one's time, right? But not with dollars. So that would be my dream for African LSPs, and any LSP for that matter.
Yeah, I think that time concept is important, and I listened to Olga Bergovaya from Smartling. She was on a podcast and she said, during this time, unfortunately, some of your free time will need to be spent playing around, reading, and so on. So yeah, that time, and all of us, we don't have time for anything, but prioritizing it. So one of the things that I like about many of these models and tools and AI tools and so on, they have a 7-day free tier or something. And Belén mentioned that your customer might come to you and say, I want to do this and I want to do it with that, with an X AI tool. So one of the things that I like, I send often a colleague of mine who's in charge of transcription, I send a new fabulous thing and say to her, listen, have a file ready that is a challenging file, that's one that we get often, and feed it to that model, see if it works. If it doesn't work, let's leave it for a month or so, and then see again. Many of you know Renato Beninato from Nimdzi. He has said on occasion to me that today is the worst that the AI is going to be. So it doesn't help you see that it isn't working now and then you leave it. I'm done with it. It's not going to work. It's never going to work because it's not working now. That continuous learning, that continuous testing, I think is very important. We don't have a lot of time. I think we can talk about this for hours and hours. Are there specific? Thank you, Belén, for answering some of those questions that we've had. Are there some of, in the last 5 minutes, are there some people that have specific questions for this is a rare treat to have these two ladies together. What are some of the, do you have some specifics that we can ask? I think you can just unmute yourself and you don't have to just unmute yourself and start.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Marina and Belén, it was a really great conversation. I like the part about having to evaluate the current and evolving needs of our clients. And I've noticed, for instance, one of our clients is using the professional version of DeepL for emails, because they always like to send their emails, in English and French, and so they're using DeepL for that. And I'm not sure what other users they have for it, but it already shows that the trend is shifting a bit. Clients are becoming aware of these tools, and so it's really, really important for us also to understand them and also know how to use them. The area of shying away from them, I think it's normal, because the client themselves are using it on their own without our support, and so it's really important for us to think about how we can contribute. So I really like the conversation. Thank you so much for the insights shared.
And I think, Adi, it's very important for that is what Belén said is know your customer, understand what they need, what they do, so that they come to you for advice and they come to you for the expertise instead of trying it on themselves and finding that, listen, my LSP doesn't even know about this technology, so perhaps they're not the person for me. So anyone else? Perhaps I can ask
one more question in the chat. 1 second, from Fleur. I'm currently doing a field work and the native speakers I am working with face difficulties with the tools I am using. Do you think the idea of implementing an ASR in the local language would be appropriate?
I think that's quite a lengthy question. So perhaps Christiana, if you can get that afterwards, we can just create a little thread and ask and ask that. One of my, we have just a couple of minutes, so perhaps I can, you mentioned the think tank and both of you are on the think tank. So how can we get involved in the think tank, if at all? Marina, you mentioned that question. You mentioned just give us some examples of the things. I know there's a YouTube channel. Just sort of what are some of the things that we can expect perhaps in future, and how can we get involved?
Well, at this moment, the think tank is still growing in a way, also in the number of activities that we have. But since this is again, a question of time, and this is a volunteer effort in free time, unfortunately, none of us has enough time to dedicate oneself full time. But we're growing, so there will be more content coming out. At the moment, we have regular articles coming out and a podcast with a new episode every third Thursday of the month. And a curated list of resources that we keep updated. But there will be more variety coming in the way in the things we published, with more educational materials coming out, different formats of materials being published, plus panels and live discussions and reports from our monthly meetings. So stay tuned for more diverse type of content. When it comes to how we can engage directly with the community, first there's always the option to ask questions, but then we were thinking it's an idea that we want to develop in the future. At the moment, we don't have a clear structure around it, to invite contributions from other people that are not directly think tank members, but can be contributors to this space. So follow us, stay tuned, and you will learn when you can start contributing with more than just questions.
And I think important to some of the great initiatives and some of the great feedback is to follow Marina and Belén on LinkedIn. They post regularly about very interesting things. You can actually go and check out the members of the think tank and follow them, because they are posting regularly about the latest, greatest things that's happening in a sober way and not adding to that anxiety and fear-mongering. So I think with that, thank you very much for giving your time to this. And I think it's an ongoing conversation that we have. It's not doom and gloom. There's lots to be learned. We are here. We are one thing that I like just to end on it. In the think tank, it's nice to hear. We have an introduction when we speak to one another. Belén is dear humans. So that is important. We are humans. This is the machine, and we are still there, and we are the important one. And it's engaging and getting together. Thank you very much. And as I said, we will get to the participants, get some of the introductory resources that you can have. And as I said, follow ALCA as well. If some of you are sort of bored and have lots of money to spend and so on, come and join us in Cape Town for the ALCA conference. It's on the 28th and 29th of August, and bring your winter coats. It's winter here, so thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Have a lovely week. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.